So where I am right now is at the edge of a vegetable plot. So what we have growing here is a mixture of eggplant and pumpkin. Looks like some of them are already beginning to come to harvest, but it's surrounded by a couple of hedgerows of our seedless hybrid of KX4, that Lucina hybrid we talked about earlier. Now what you can see in this case is the Lucina is being maintained as a relatively small hedge species, so we're not letting them get to be the large trees that they naturally can produce. We want the windbreak protection for these vegetable crops. It's here in Hawaii. Those trade winds can certainly cause a lot of damage even to sensitive crops. But we don't want them to get so large that they begin to shade out our crops here in the middle of the field. So in this case, one of the things of a multi-purpose tree is that it can be pruned back regularly and vigorously resprout to maintain its vigor and the benefits that we're looking for. The other thing about Lucina, as with many nitrogen-fixing trees, is that the nitrogen-rich leaf material can be used as a green manure and incorporated into this plot in between rotations of the vegetables that we want to grow and harvest. We can see though on the end of this plot that if we don't manage these trees actively, that within a year or so they can get to be pretty large, and you can begin to see the branches of those trees encroach into the middle of the plot where they would cause shading and could potentially reduce the productivity of the vegetables. So active management of our hedgerow multi-purpose trees allows for us to optimize the interactions between the green manure and the wind protection against the shading of the trees if they were to get larger. So what we can see from this hedgerow of trees behind me is that the branches are beginning to encroach into some of the edges of the plot for our vegetables. So obviously we can manage that by pruning the trees back to minimize that shading above ground. But one of the things that's a little harder to manage is the below ground competition. That competition we can't see between the root systems of our trees and our crops, our vegetables in this case. So while we certainly think about the shading relative to the width of the canopy of the trees, the roots of these hedgerow species, certainly the older they get, those roots are going to continue to move across the field so that well beyond the edge of the canopy we can certainly expect to find roots of these trees and competition for water and nutrients between the hedgerow species, of course, and our vegetables or other crops. So managing that, certainly by pruning the trees, will help to reduce the growth rate and the demand for resources, but it's something we're just going to have to try to deal with as a trade-off. Now, hopefully, some of the roots of our trees go down deeper than those of our crop, so there can be complementary uptake of water and nutrients. But to be honest, most of the roots of these trees are going to be in the same nutrient and water-rich superficial soil layers as our crop, and so that's just something we're going to have to live with. And so optimizing those interactions above ground and below ground is something that has to be taken into consideration when designing and managing your agroforestry system.